Thanks everybody for coming. I'm just going to play this on procedural systems. If you can't hear it, let me know. And it's about, I think about 12 or 15 minutes, and then we'll take questions on it.
It seems to me with appropriate education, behavior that's irrelevant to a situation will rarely occur. Because in the early training of children in schools, they learn what it means to have relevant information. And irrelevant information, what if people come from another world and attack us? Well, there's no other people on other worlds that are preparing to attack us that we know of. It's suppositions that are irrelevant. Now, I would say that children in the future will think in terms of the events that they're familiar with. And they will deal with problems we are familiar with, not things that are supposed to occur. So you have less speculative types of behavior and more referential behavior, behavior that corresponds with the nature of things. Of course, you got a lot of remnants of old world behavior, but that's the purpose of the new schools. That's the purpose of a resource-based economy, to plow through all the old values and irrelevancies and outgrow the need for inefficiency of that kind. Otherwise, a new social system is not new unless it changes things. But if people say, well, I like your ideas, but I like the old world, then you'll have old world problems. There is no way to surpass problems unless you invent new ways and different approaches. If you all want to cling to the same old values, you're going to have the same old problems. People say there is a better life for all people. Without a description of what they mean by a better life, you don't know what they're talking about. Are they talking about a house like Aunt Minnie has, or driving a Mercedes? This has nothing to do with a better life. This has to do with personal advantage. A better life can provide personal advantage. A better life can provide personal advantage for everyone, rather than just a selected few. A reservoir takes care of millions of people. A water tank above your home takes care of you. Filters in a reservoir can maintain the cleanliness of waters. But hoping that things work out is part of the old world. Unfortunately, efficient systems used by the Army. They train people to be excellent at handling anti-aircraft guns, aircraft, procedural systems and landing under adverse conditions. And there is nothing else but the best knowledge we've accumulated. And that's what we instruct people in. Unfortunately, it's used by military systems. In the future, more appropriate behavior will be out there for people to learn how to use it, how to access information if they don't know how to use it, where to get information, rather than your brother-in-law telling you things, unless he's qualified. I would say that people will have much greater access to useful information, which can be immediately converted and proven, whereas other systems are not. Politics in no way deals with anything real, just the opinions of different people. A lot of people say, well, is this a kind of a dictatorship? Well, when you get licensed to drive a car, your license is based on your ability to perform. That's a dictatorship. When you fly an airplane, you can't land any place. You have to contact the tower and tell them what your flight is and when you're coming in. In other words, it's all procedural. In the Navy, when you operate aircraft carriers, the landing systems are all procedural. Otherwise, you'd have chaos. So you have traffic lights that are controlled to handle variations in traffic, all procedural systems. In fact, you'll see a lot of signs on parking lots, no left turn, or no right turn when you leave the parking lot. Those are procedural systems to minimize accidents. If you have a better system, put the better system forward. Let's hear about it. But in the meantime, operation of ocean liners are all according to procedural systems. Docking, unloading, all that are procedural systems. If the procedure hasn't worked out, then they have a study group that studies different procedures and how effective they are. So, is the future a dictatorship? In procedural systems, yes. When you go to work for any corporation today, the minute you punch that time clock, you're under the dictates of that corporation. They don't ask you what you'd like to do today, how would you like to spend the day. They give you an assignment. You're to check this out or check that out, or you're to drill so many holes or build this unit. Until you leave the plant, you're free of that dictatorship. Everybody fears the dictatorship. The procedures used by an ophthalmologist on examining your eyes is a procedural system based on the complaints that you have. If you tell them you have shooting pains in the eyes, or you see floaters in front of the eyes, or you see cylindrical forms, whatever you tell them determines the procedure. If you have certain types of pain in the chest, or certain types of headaches in the frontal lobe, or the visual hemispheres, or the temporal lobe, that gives the doctor the procedural system. Remember, all professions use procedural systems. But don't compare that with the dictatorship, the private dictates of a man like Hitler, or some king that has some pet peeve. That is not what I'm talking about. Procedural systems are how to escape a burning building. Procedural systems is don't use elevators if there's smoke in the building or fire in the building. That's procedures worked out. So it's not a dictatorship in the sense that somebody is manipulating you for their own advantage. That I would consider offensive, not a procedural system. If your landing gear doesn't come down on an airplane, there's a way to put that plane down that lessens the probability of a lot of casualties. But that's based upon tests. Procedural system. Do you understand the difference between a procedural system and dictatorship? Dictatorship is pet values put out by an individual with no basis. So I see the future as having more and safer procedural systems for the benefit of saving lives of people. Lifeguards have a procedural system. That's how they qualify. Airline pilots have to pass certain procedural tests. That's how they qualify. Architects, engineers have to work along certain procedural lines. So if the word procedure scares you, it's your own projections that are frightful, not procedural systems. Procedural systems are methods of making a safer landing under adverse conditions. We will never accomplish total procedural systems. We're always in the process of learning. Learning means to find out which procedure works the best. And we say this is the best we know up to now. That doesn't mean it's the best procedural system. With new inventions and new sensory devices, we'll be able to get closer approximations of safer conduct for people. It looks, of course, to normal people, it looks like some kind of dictatorship. But there's always a dictatorship. If you want your flying pilot's license, you have to be able to land, you have to be able to handle an airplane according to the best known procedures today. Otherwise you can't get your license. The same for driving an automobile. Blind people can't get driver's license until some sensory car is designed that can take you anywhere you want to go. Then blind people will be able to get in the car and go. When that procedural system is worked out, presently They're working on cars that drive themselves. They're working on cars that know when they need a repair, and they will blink and tell you that they're a week behind or that you're a month behind in having the car checked out. At a later date, the car itself will determine when it goes in for procedural system. A checkup, in other words. That's what a physical checkup is for. They recommend physical checkups for those that can afford it. If you don't have a job and can't afford it, you have to delay it. So what good is a procedural system if you don't have the money to carry it out? So a monetary system does not really give people the best procedural system. Their purchasing power does. So I know very few people that live in the kind of house they want to live in, or that drive the kind of car that they want. They drive what they can afford. They live in what they can afford. They see the doctors they can afford, never the best. They can't select conditions depending on your purchasing power. So you're limited by the dictates of your purchasing power. Every system is a dictatorship. Some are false in that they serve the vested interests rather than all the individuals. I would say that the process of capitalism serves the interests of those in control. The majority of people are not served by the capitalist system, or the communist system, or the socialist system, because there's no procedural system worked out that I have observed that offers people the best, because they don't even know what the best is. They don't even have a social design. When communists build cities, they're the same as our cities. When they build automobiles, they're the same as our automobiles. They don't seem to have a procedural system that makes communism worth it, that makes socialism worth it. The fascists have a procedural system for keeping them in power. Those that are elitists, that are already in power. This is their procedural system. It's designed to keep them in power, not to benefit humanity. I think that the Venus Project is the only project that I know of, a resource-based economy that's designed to enhance the lives of all people. And if there's anything you don't like about it, or if there's anything you think won't work, bring it up. We're very interested. Nothing is final. Everything can be improved. We want the input of many different people to make the system better, never perfect.
Okay, that's it for now on procedural systems, and Jacque's here to take any questions if you'd like.
Okay, Roxanne, do you want to start with the ones in the bottom of the chat as usual?
The first question here, are the cities of the Venus Project based on Fibonacci? I'm not sure what that is. Sequences in architecture, the symbiotic relations are measured.
Yes, measured.
Yeah, but it says the symbiotic relations, I just made it, are measured with it. Are you familiar with that? No. Okay.
Roxanne is asking if the TVP cities are based on the Fibonacci sequence, which is a mathematical sequence.
Jacque, you are aware of biomimicry. That's probably more accurate.
Are you talking about where technology mimics organic systems?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to go with the Fibonacci sequence, but you know, essentially, I suppose it's touching on biomimicry.
Now, I think he's talking more about the relationship of the rings of the city. Are they, in line with the Fibonacci sequence, which is basically where the numbers keep doubling themselves. So, sorry, the two numbers that are previously added together become the third number. So, for example, 0 and 1 is 1, which becomes the next number. 1 and 1 equals 2, so 2 becomes the next number. 1 plus 2 equals 3, so that becomes 5 becomes the next number. 3 plus 5 equals 8, that becomes the next number. I think he's asking if the relationship of the way the city is actually designed is done as per the Fibonacci code, so you get things like the golden ratio and stuff like that.
No, they're not based on that mathematical principle. It's based on other principles, such as how well the system works, how much resources are used to accomplish a given task, and how safe it is for people to work at it. They're very closely related statistical data to the outcome of any project. I'm not sure in the old language what another person means when they use a similar terminology, unless they break it down to details.
Are you against creating teams to build small living examples of the Venus Project? What I have in mind is just a few homes in each county or state with environmental requirements.
It doesn't work that way. It won't work that way. You need a change in the thinking and the values of the people that are involved in the project.
Talking about the thing that we have here in the Venus Project, members could be surveyed, evaluated at first, rely on donations to build. Okay. Yeah, we don't think it will work with just like small communities that are for a more efficient type of living. The next stage for us would be either a larger research center where more people could work and work together, or the first city, or a theme park with the research center included. But if people want to get together, and so it's easier to live for themselves that way, collaboratively with several families and more efficient houses, and they want to talk about this direction and learn about this direction, I think that's fine.
What's the question?
A recent article reveals that when parents are controlling, their children are more likely to become delinquents.
I can't deal with that because it's not specific enough.
When a society is controlling...
Oh, I understand your language.
I'm just finishing the question. When a society is controlling would the same thing happen? The Venus Project is not proposing a controlling society. I don't know what the question is, but do you think that if parents are more controlling, they have more delinquent people?
I can't answer that.
I mean,
I don't
kids.
know what they're doing. There's nothing specific. The language is too sloppy.
Well, there's a reference to an article. We can take a look at that. Oh, okay. Just read on there, Andrew.
I've not actually got any more questions in at the moment, so I think what we'll do is we'll reduce the talk power and see if anyone's got anything they want to actually ask. Please keep it relevant to the Venus Project, preferably not relevant to the system that we're in at the moment. We're trying to get rid of this current system, so please try and keep your questions relevant to the Venus Project and the subjects associated with it. Thanks.
Do you want to talk about the new movie? What is it going to be about?
If you're talking about the upcoming documentary, this isn't, quote, the movie that we want to do, that we're asking for donations for the scriptwriter. That's two separate projects. I'm glad you brought it up, because a lot of people think that this trailer that we just put out is for the movie we've been trying to get funding for. It's not at all. We just finished a documentary about the Venus Project, and it's for primarily people who don't know about it. It's an introduction about the Venus Project, and we're putting it online for free. We really don't have something like that out there, so people can duplicate it and hand it out within the activist movement or any place else. So we wanted a piece out there from the Venus Project, and that's what it is. It's about 52 minutes. It's all done, but we are having somebody do an original score for it, and they're working on that now.
You want to talk about what kind of information is brought out there?
What kind of information in the documentary? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and is it like Jacque lecturing about different topics, or because in the trailer you see a lot of news reports and stuff like that? What is like the nature of the documentary?
Yes, it's going through fundamentals of some of the inadequacies of the monetary system and what the alternative is and the design for that. There are interviews primarily with Jacque introducing it because, you know, he was the originator of the Venus Project, so he's introducing it. I say a few things in there too, but there's a lot of narration with photographs as well. You'll have to stay tuned, I guess. And then there's a large section at the end with the designs, what alternatives we have. And a lot of it I'm sure you've seen. It's put together differently, but as I mentioned, it's primarily geared towards an introduction for people who are not aware of it, so we have something to pass out and get more people interested. I'm going to see if I can get it onto a couple independent stations, television stations in the United States. We may be able to do that, I'm not sure. I've never seen anything on the independent stations here that is against the monetary system and proposing a different type of system, but we'll give it a try.
Got a couple of questions here, Roxanne, if I can ask them. Starting with, is there any specific release date for the documentary? If not, why not?
No, I don't have a specific release date because I'm dependent right now on someone else who's writing the music. And at first she thought she could have it done very quickly, but now she's seeing there's a lot of music that's to be done. She's hoping to finish it by the end of this month because next month is very busy for her. And once she finishes, then I'll put it onto the documentary, and then we have to work on making sure all the sound is coordinated well. I can't give a very specific date. I might be able to as it goes along, but we are saying in March. It's as close as we can get. Hopefully near the beginning of March, more so than the end.
Okay, let's have a look. Right. I've been talking to people about TVP to gather people's questions in my area. I came up with this interesting problem. With mechanisation, you can build several devices almost overnight with increase of demand. But what about food? Vegetables and meat can't be stored and take time to grow.
What is the question regarding the length of time growing food?
I think they're saying that basically the problems with storing vegetables and meat and the fact that they take X amount of time to grow, that we might not be able to meet the demand. I don't know. That's all I can get from it, really.
I think we can. I think we can meet the demand. But the time to do that will have to be estimated by the agronomists or the people involved in growing food and maintaining the areas for growing food. Don't forget, we also will cultivate foods that are not cultivated today in the oceans. We will also work more in hydroponics. We will work on air plants and hundreds of other new systems that are not out there yet.
A lot of the scientists today, in regards to food, their work is directed toward how to make a longer shelf life through poisons and preservatives, yes, that we use on the plants and we're growing too. So we're going to have to redirect that in different directions because we would not grow that way.
My intention from this point onwards is to work on developing technologies for the TVP agricultural belt. If anybody wants to discuss food production in any detail, could you come to me and Stan on the tech research team so that we can discuss all those technologies?
Okay, got another question for you here. Is it true someone donated $40,000 for the movie?
Yes, that's true. They donated it for the scriptwriter.
So could we get some more details about the collective aspects of TVP? Let me just see if I can get them to expand upon that a little bit. Okay, scrap that one for the minute. Could you describe how you would manage or avoid pollution in the Venus Project cities?
What type of pollution? We recycle waste, we neutralize materials that are harmful to the environment or filter them out by electrostatic filters or chemical filters. In other words, there are many different ways of doing things. I have to address a specific question in order to give you a specific answer.
Something else to take into account with Jacque's designs for cities is they all use clean renewable energies. All of the materials are recycled where possible. The industrial areas are actually outside of the cities, so not around sort of housing areas, which are within the cities. The water and waste recycling areas are outside of the city. A lot of that stuff's sort of not within the city limits where people would actually be living, so a lot easier to deal with the pollution when it's not part of the actual integral part of the city, whereas in somewhere like London, pollution's actually very much part of the city. Things like the transportation would all be running on clean renewable energies, so you wouldn't have the fossil fuel pollution, etc., that you have in current cities. It's a very different design than what we've got now.
In the cities, we have a built-in transportation system that doesn't use fossil fuels, so we don't have those problems to deal with. A lot of problems that you are bringing up are within the monetary system. We don't have those problems in the first place.
In combination with new communication devices, it will be possible to share skills and experiences. How far will this go? The more we see everyone the same, the less individualism there will be. It would be awesome to get a description of how far this will go from Jacque's point of view.
I don't know what you mean by individualism, but most people would be conditioned to invent and make contributions to society. Now, by individual, do you mean will people make individual contributions? Yes. There'll be many more inventions in the Venus Project because they'll be facilitated to make inventions. They'll be encouraged to create in all the different disciplines. Well, I said that when people ask me whether people will be alike, they will in certain areas. None of them will want to kill anyone. None of the people raised or conditioned in the schools of the future will want to harm anybody or the environment because it hurts them in turn. Whenever you do anything nasty to anybody, it doesn't reflect well upon you nor their future. Prisons will be obsolete in the future. We will not blame people for the way they've been conditioned, meaning if people are brought up to be Catholics or Lutherans or Seventh-day Adventists, you cannot blame them for that. It's not their fault. It's the environment they've been exposed to. We will expose people to a new environment and test the validity of our proposals before we build such an environment or university or school. We will test the methods first to see if they work. If they work, we will use it.
If you want to use those old terms as far as individuals, people would have so much more range and so much more exposure to anything that they want to learn and do and participate in, that people ask those kind of questions, you can always say yes. They will be much more individuals because people would be more multidisciplinarians. They wouldn't be just taught a little discipline to get a job. The range of people's behavior today is chaotic, non-referential, and they look at that as being individual. It's really not very constructive.
How can we clean up the radioactive materials that are being dumped in the air and in the oceans?
Well, that depends on the state of technology at the time. There are many different types of filters that have been designed and materials that have the characteristics of causing certain materials to cling to other materials. We will use filters of different types, surface filters, penetration filters, atmospheric treatments of different kinds, but specifically I'd have to know what to filter out, what you're trying to filter out. Radioactive material spread throughout the atmosphere is a very tough task, and that depends on our conduct today. If we dump radioactive material into the oceans, the atmosphere, it's going to be a very difficult job to do.
Okay, question for Jacque. Would you consider having seminars on technology, either weekly, bi-weekly, or at other times, discussing how specific things work and the pros and cons of various methods and technologies?
Absolutely. It's continuous. All schools, all new inventions will be on public television informing the public as to the changes that come. So people will be well prepared to accept change. I'm inclined not to do that due to the commercial value of what I talk about. People can go off in the commercial world and profit on those systems. I'm not too interested in advancing this system where other people can take advantage with these ideas of others not in the privileged position. Remember that politicians say things people like to hear. They don't deal with problems. They avoid problems. They lie about one another. I don't want to hand that out as a system because I'm more interested in changing the value system of people than some immediate procedural system.
Go ahead, Jacque.
I'm interested in the way people think. If they think the old way, it won't work. If they learn the new way, it's more apt to benefit society. I'm interested in presenting ideas to enhance the Venus Project, not the free enterprise system.
Okay, Jonathan, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, you talked about how you changed, rehabilitated drug addicts and alcoholics, but I never got to hear the story of how you did it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can talk about it. Most people that have those problems are focused on themselves. They have a low self-sufficiency. They don't see themselves getting anywhere. They don't have the respect that they need to survive. So we take away the self-focus and put the focus on the social system. And if they get out of themselves, they are less inclined to have those problems. When you work on the benefit, for the benefit of all the world's people, then you get out of yourself and you no longer want to take a drink. You no longer want to drug yourself up to cloud out the way you think. It's the way you think that got you into the trouble and the way you think you got from your society. So I'm saying that we take the individual away from the self. It's the self-centered values that create problems.
Also, you took away a lot of their guilt, too. Is that correct?
You didn't say that.
I just...
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Or what do you think about intuition?
What do you think about intuition?
I don't even think about it.
You want to expand on that?
Intuitive feeling is based upon your experience and your interpretation of an experience, but it is not always verifiable. Everybody has intuitive feelings about different things. Sometimes a person has a dream, and several weeks later, some event parallels that dream. But you have to keep a statistical record to find out if you really have intuition or whether you're projecting the future based on your own experience. Everything can be tested and evaluated.
So this argument that intuition comes out of nowhere and you can know the answer instantly and like without having previous experience, this is bullshit.
Yeah, I think the same is safe to say with Jacque. The idea that you can know without not having any experience in whatever it is that you're knowing. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I actually say something about that?
Sure.
There are actually millions of nerve cells within the lining of the stomach. That's actually all connected to the limbic system in the brain. There's actually a biofeedback mechanism when you eat food. You're getting pleasure or uncomfortable sensations with eating different food.
Got another one for you, Jacque. This one's more on sort of city design again. Do you think the actual design of the cities will destroy a lot of the culture in our current designs globally? For example, in Indian countries, you have that they have a certain sort of design for their buildings. The buildings in the UK look very different from the buildings in, say, Sweden, for example. Do you not feel that by having cities all over the world that look almost exactly the same, i.e. the designs of the Venus Project, that we'll lose some of that culture?
A lot of the cultures of different nations are strictly bullshit. They have no meaning. When you find another nation interesting, you may find it interesting. But if you learn something from the other nation, then it's useful. But there's a lot of traditions that give us nothing, that set us back. We have to learn how to detect the difference between values that work and values that are superimposed.
And is that true within design as well? Different designs in different cultures, would you say?
Yeah, different designs where the Chinese and Japanese have a kind of a curlicue on the roof tip, which doesn't mean a thing. In other words, there are many things in architecture that do nothing for the architecture. They don't make the building stronger, it just looks different. And making it look different is not really creativity. The creativity we look for is making a building safer, better, easier to operate, longer lasting, and non-threatening to humans.
Efficient use of resources as well.
Jacque, how would you deal with talking about sex to your children? Would you get a book on human anatomy and show them and explain how it works? What would be your method?
No, you explain it with drawings, if you can make them. If you can't make the drawing, then use books and explain reproduction just as it occurs, just as you learn it. That you have to level the children. When they ask where the babies come from, then answer that question. Don't say the stork brings the baby. You're lying to them. Yes, you try to ask questions in terms of the level of the inquiry. A child will not ask for specific details of that kind, but when they do, answer them honestly.
There seems to be a lot of people find talking to racists and bigots as, a very, very big task. A lot of that would take a long time, and you seem to have done it in short periods of time. So to speak. A month and a half for talking with the Ku Klux Klan and so on. Do you find religious people to be different? It seems like it's going to take even longer for them, and if so, why do you think it is?
No, I don't find any difference between religious people and the Klan. What you have to do if you're talking to religious people, let me just give you one example. Religious people say they believe in God and they believe in the teachings of Christ or Muhammad or Allah, the different philosophies. What I do when I meet with religious people, I say it says in the Bible, thou shalt not kill. What does that mean to you? And it says don't judge other people or you will be judged. That means you have no business judging other people. You don't know what the conditions are that shape their values. Therefore, you should not do jury duty is what it means. You should not judge your neighbor. You can say my neighbor reacts differently than I do to the same situation. But judging them as good or bad is a personal value system which has to be corrected. When you're dealing with religious people, you point out, use the Bible. Use the Bible saying you're not supposed to judge people. You're not supposed to beat up your enemy. You're supposed to love your enemy, consider your enemy. You're supposed to, when a man strikes you, turn the other cheek. I've never met a person that practiced their religion that way. So it's just a verbal hobby with most people. It's not an actual method. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. That means the Venus Project.
Well, that's not exactly what I meant. Like, if you're talking to a racist person and you get it from that point to the point where he doesn't see black people as inferior, that's a very big change. But getting a religious person from a point where he believes in God to a point where he doesn't believe in God, I'd say that's going to take longer, right?
It depends on the individual. If he's honest, if you meet an honest person that's a racist, that really wants to know whether the races have different characteristics, you then point out to that individual. If you were raised by a Filipino family, you'd act like a Filipino. If you were raised by a French family, you'd act like a Frenchman. You have to convince them of that. Show them pictures of it. Show them that a Frenchman never speaks Greek when he's born. He doesn't even speak French. He has to learn the language. Every word that you utter, you've learned from your environment. If you can't reach them in that way, then you need a lot of practice. In other words, you can always change people if you can remember what changed you. In other words, people believe there are inferior races and they don't feel that it was environment. Say, if you took your baby and gave it to a member of what you consider an inferior race that cannot educate your child will behave like the members of people with insufficient information.
Jonathan was talking about, do you feel that it's harder to convince religious people?
No, it's not harder to convince religious people. It's no different than convincing the Klan or any other group that believes in superior beings.
Is it harder to take away their religion?
No, it's not hard. You have to use the Bible to take away their religion. By quotations from the Bible. Say, do you believe thou shalt not kill? Why did you put your son in the army? Why did you allow it? Why do you hate certain people? That's against all religious teachings. Look at the Ten Commandments. People talk about it, but they don't follow it. Get them to back up what they talk about.
I have a question, if I can jump in. Is that okay?
Sure.
I was wondering if Jacque and Roxanne, how much they've maybe researched open source and considered pursuing projects that the Venus Project does under an open source methodology, and if they have concerns, or if they've looked into it, or are they still looking into it, or if they've stopped looking into it. I'd like to know why.
We went over this. Sven might have, I don't know if you're on, Sven, might have the record on this. We dealt with it a while ago in some of the questions and answers.
Besides, there's no such thing as open source. People are already victims of culture and tend to think in terms of their culture. When they listen to new ideas, they do not listen to them objectively.
What does open source mean to you, Jacque?
Yeah,
if I may ask.
That sounded like you thought it was something different. Maybe Jacque doesn't know what open source means?
May I just jump on this, please?
No, I'd rather you didn't. I'd like to hear what Jacque has to say. If he doesn't know about this, I think it might be because of the people surrounding him. Jacque, open source is a license, and what it basically does, it's copyleft. It's the opposite of copyright. It means that you can use it how you choose. The license might say you can't use it commercially, but you can't keep it. You can't patent it. You've got a license out on the thing, and you basically would be providing something for the public. You'd have to research what Linux is, or something along those lines. It allows people to pick up the blueprints for something, make modifications, and republish them.
That's to the point. Let me just get to this, please. Jacque knows very well what open source is, and you were just naming some things that are actually controversial to the ideas of the Venus Project. If someone takes the blueprints of the Venus Project and changes them, they are no longer relevant to the Venus Project because they become obfuscated. No, let me just finish, please.
Let me interrupt you for a second. You know, you've got wiring inside the buildings to get the electricity flowing. You know, somebody might have one version, and they could be tested and simulated and so on and so forth. And without having to go through all the rigmarole, red tape and whatnot, somebody else might be able to pick up the designs and make an alternate version. You're getting into the philosophies behind the Venus Project. I'm talking about refining the blueprints and getting thousands of engineers involved. You know how many thousands of people are working on Linux distributions right now, an open source project? You've got a few hundred, and I don't even know if they're working.
And that will be quite scientific, you know, to share your ideas, your blueprints.
They cannot share it unless they understand what that open source information is about. And most people cannot accept that as the writer intended. They interpret it. It's all information that's put out there is subject to interpretation unless they have similar methods of evaluation. So a person cannot even listen to a new idea if they've been conditioned against that.
Okay, well,
Technology that's not understood is just as bad as information that's unreal.
Well, I'm going to go from your lectures and say, you didn't answer my question.
I'll try again. When a person has information presented to them, it is not presented as as it was intended to. People interpret information today. They do not read things and say, I see, I was wrong.
Something to take into account here, sorry for jumping in here. The Venus Project is a system. It's a whole thing. It's not, you can't just take Jacque's design for a toilet, for example, with a grey water system, and just give that out to people and go, right, that's it, that's the Venus Project. That's not the Venus Project. The Venus Project is the total system. So it's the designs of the cities. It's the social design. It's the design of, you know, how we go about implementing the automation within the cities to improve the lives of people. It's the methods of how we go about developing the resource-based economy as Jacque's laid it out in the last 75 years he's been working on it. Well, no, not really, because if you're going to be giving out, like if Jacque goes and gives out his design for how he puts his construction, how he puts his buildings up, etc., that's not helping anyone except for the elitist people that can afford to put the research into that and then make a marketable product from it based on Jacque's original design or idea. That doesn't help the Venus, but that doesn't help the Venus Project in any way, shape, or form. If you can show us how that would help the Venus Project, I'm sure we'll be listening.
Well, I can tell you you're wrong. Not all the licenses would even allow for that. They wouldn't allow for the resale of that, first of all. And I got a like a little analogy here for you. Let's say, Andrew, you end up having to go, you know, make money and survive, and Roxanne has to do the same thing, and I don't want this to happen, but it's inevitable. Jacque passes away, and somebody else is in charge of the Venus Project, and we think they're a nice person. But the Venus Project has property, and it's all of Jacque's intellectual property, and you want volunteers to be working on and refining this intellectual property that can be sold. You guys can sell Jacque's designs. You might be a non-profit company, but you can sell his designs. Jacque would not do that. Roxanne probably wouldn't do that. And Andrew probably wouldn't do that. And many of the others wouldn't. That doesn't mean that won't happen. You put it under an open source license, and you're protecting all the future people who are working towards RBE from having this be subverted. And I think you're twisting it around as to your fears, not you personally, but your fear is twisting this around to say that, well, people won't use it responsibly. I don't really think you've looked into it that well, and maybe for whatever reasons that aren't worth getting into, but I really think you should give this a second look. I can't imagine you guys getting the kind of support you need, and you know, without going open source. But you know, hey, you know, best of luck to you guys. And Jacque, thank you for all you've taught me. I do appreciate it.
What I would say to that is maybe if you can get together with Roxanne, if you drop her an email.
I've emailed so many times. Okay. I've emailed you, Roxanne, you know, so many times. They don't get back. I don't know if somebody else jumps in and gets into the emails, or maybe she don't like what I have to say. I've talked to so many of the administrators. They never seem to get the word through, or maybe they do, and they don't want to hear it.
I mean, you talk about Linux as open source and protected under open source, but if you look at Apple, they basically took Linux, adapted it how they saw fit, slapped a license on it.
You're incorrect. It's Unix. No, Unix.
That was Unix.
Linux is a derivative of Unix. Apple took Unix. You've got your history backwards.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, try and speak to Jacque and Roxanne about it. See if you can put your point across. See where you go. See where it goes.
Well, that's what I was trying to do here. Anyways, thank you again, Jacque. I appreciate the lectures and stuff. I did learn a lot from you. But I think
May I say something here, please?
Yep, sure. We're going to close it up after this one.
Okay. Just briefly, the question of things being protected under open source and so on and so forth, this is with today's law standards, today's legal standards. We well know that the people in power can change the laws at a whim. So what might be safe under open source today, in a year's time, might not be.
But that's exactly the same as intellectual property today. You could say that for Jacque's ideas right now as they stand under their current protections. They can be taken away just the same way. I mean, that means nothing.
Well, it does if we're talking about designs that, as Andrew has explained, are integral to the design of the society. It's not just a question of the buildings themselves. The way the cities are designed.
Now you're just distracting a direct response to what you said.
Affect the way that society will grow.
No, you put a dig on open source saying that, we don't know if the laws in the future would actually protect open source. We don't know if the laws in the future would protect regular intellectual property rights, patent law, and copyright.
No, of course.
Right. But at the moment, that's fine. But at the moment, Jacque has not released any of his designs to anywhere on the planet at the moment. They exist simply at the Venus Project, and they'll stay that way until Jacque is ready to be able to implement those designs into a resource-based economy, whether that be the first city or whatever. And Jacque's always said, cast not.
I got to be honest here. I don't think he has any. I love Jacque. I don't think he has any clue what open source is, and I think the people around him have failed to, give them a good definition of it.
Well,
we're gonna.
Arguably, if we use the scientific method, we will reach at the same conclusions. The same designs, not maybe aesthetically, but look-alike. With the same efficiency at the levels he speaks about. It's all you can reach about it with the scientific method.
I have a question for Jacque.
All right, let's make this the last one then, because I need to get going.
I was wondering if he actually has any portable power generation designs currently. If not, I have a few that I could send over to him.
Do you have portable power generation design?
That isn't the answer to the question. I want to answer the question.
Go ahead.
The theory of evolution was put forth by Darwin. It was open. Anybody can read the theory of evolution, but not everybody can understand it as Darwin meant it. That's the problem. First, they have to be given the method of evaluation, how to think about things they read about. They don't always understand open source information. If the black people took their problems openly to the Ku Klux Klan, they would lose the argument. If the Jews went to a Nazi meeting to raise money for the B'nai B'rith, they would not be able to raise money for the B'nai B'rith if they openly spoke about it, because the interpretation of what they say is the problem. It's man's inability to interpret open source information. You think that open source information has the same meaning to everybody? It does not. People who believe the earth is flat don't even know how to think about it in terms of being global or spherical. You have to give them the information they lack. And you can't write about it because they've been brought up not to believe that, to fight it. When I tried to defend blacks, when I went up to the Klan and say, "Why are you beating up that black kid? He didn't hurt anybody." That was honest. I got beaten up too.
I was told I was called a nigger lover from the north. But do not interpret.
Oh,
May I leave you guys with some information on what open source is? Because Jacque, I love you. You seem very like you're talking about something very different. I'm talking about a license structure, and your fear that people won't get your version of the Venus Project, or they won't read your book, or they won't have watched your lectures, I think is getting in the way, and your lack of understanding of what open source is getting in the way of something that could be very beneficial for the Venus Project. I'm going to private message your screen name with a couple, simple documents that explain what open source is. I hope to God you read them. Well, not to God, but whatever. I hope you read them.
If you present evidence and information on open source, if you do that, remember the person looking at it has to know something about the subject in order to evaluate it. And the theory of evolution has not caused people who go to church to step out of the church saying there's no basis for this. When evolution was presented as an open source, it did not take to everybody.
I'm talking about something completely different, Jacque. That's why we're having trouble communicating. I'm talking about a type of license.
Yeah, but he talks about, how people will react to this license that you talk about, and when it gets out in the public, how will people react to the blueprints?
Well, here's a little example for you. Darwin. Sorry, can I just say this? Darwin wouldn't. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Can I just? So let me just say this one thing, right? If you'd asked Darwin when he was alive, the fault of social Darwinism, i.e. capitalism, what we've got now, the survival of the fittest, where the people who can't afford to live a reasonable life don't live a reasonable life. If you'd asked Darwin if that was how he would have liked to have his ideas translated into a social system, he would have it'd be turning in his grave right now, I'm sure. That's not what he was on about when he was talking about the
Yeah, but dude, you have no choice. You can't control how other people interpret things.
Right, you can if you protect the work that you're doing.
You're not going to get anything done with it.
No, but you can if you protect the work that you're doing. If there's specific designs that Jacque feels that if he lets those designs out, that it's not going to be used in a beneficial way, then he has the right not to give those things out. And I defend that right, absolutely.
Of course he has the right. I'm not saying that. But it doesn't sound like he understands it at all. It sounds like he's winging it and didn't do his homework or something, and came into class and tried to give a good bullshit answer to the teacher. It doesn't sound like he understands it. It sounds like you guys have failed to help him understand it, which is a shame. I'm going to leave him with some reading. I'm going to leave the Venus Project screen name with a couple documents to read, only a couple pages. Hopefully he reads it. Maybe we can have a different conversation after that. If he still feels the way he does, fine, no problem.
Great, thanks. Okay, we're going to tie it up here, guys. Thanks everyone for coming again. Gone on a little bit longer than normal. We'll put the next week's presentation in, hopefully before Sunday. I know Jacque and Roxanne were really busy this week, and unfortunately they couldn't really get prepared well enough for it this week. The aim is to try and get sort of 30 to 40 minute presentation each week to give you guys a little bit longer to actually develop your questions relevant to the subjects being discussed in the presentation. Obviously this week we only had a sort of 10-15 minute presentation due to lack of preparation, which we hope to get fixed next time. So thanks everyone for coming. Hope everyone got their answers to their questions. Sorry if some didn't. A lot of people asked me a lot of questions I didn't get a chance to answer. We didn't get a chance to go through them all. Hopefully we get through some of them next week. Thanks everyone. Thanks Jacque and Roxanne, and we'll see you next week.
okay, thanks.